All right. We are live. Welcome to The Wave, ladies and gentlemen. I am so excited to be here with our special guest this week, Peter Arcari. The Wave is touching down in a big way. Last week, we went into a deep exploration into all the scientific research that's being done with the healing power of psychedelic medicine. We talked with Trevor Miller from MAPS Canada. He's on the chair. He's the chair and the boardman of MAPS, and he's actually putting out a petition right now to decriminalize psychedelic medicine in Canada. So check out the Wave Facebook page to sign that. And we're really going to ride off of that momentum here today to talk more about building a relationship with psychedelic medicine. So this is a great episode for those of you who may have used psychedelic medicine often, and also for those who maybe not have tried it, you're still on the fence, or maybe you don't even know a lot about psychedelic medicine. So this is an opportunity to really learn from who I would like to consider an expert in this area, somebody who I really come to advice relating to healing in many areas. It's Peter Arcari, who is an expressive arts practitioner. He's also a mental and spiritual coach, and he's also a shamanic healing facilitator. So I just want to say thank you, Peter, for being here. I'm so excited for this conversation. I know I'm going to learn a lot. And yeah, so could you please tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi, Chris. Hi, everyone. I hope everyone's doing well and keeping safe. My name's Peter. It's nice to meet you. And I've been an expressive arts practitioner primarily. And what that means is I guide people through private sessions or workshops where we dive deep into what is our unique way of communicating, whether it's through movement, through sounding, through words, through visuals, and how to connect into what it is that we want to communicate and what are the different ways that we can communicate other than using only our words. And I also have 300-hour yoga Alliance certified training. So I'm a certified yoga instructor, as well as a 1-year, 300-hour meditation certificate, and also a certified life coach. So where the spiritual health coach, I call it, or spiritual connection coach, comes from is from for the last 15 years, I have attended and been trained by and guided in ceremonial settings and hosting, facilitating, and guiding people through ceremonial settings and ceremonies where we connect into something that starts to bridge out of the psychological realm or medical realm and into what is deemed a spiritual realm, or something that is not it's I guess the simplest way to put it is something that we personally experience that cannot be explained or experienced by everyone else in the room. And that's a very personal experience. And we can move outside of things that are within our life experience and things that are within our memory and within our training. And we can move into spaces where we are gaining knowledge and experience from a non-physical source. Let's keep it generic like that. And how do we have a discussion about what that source is? What does it mean to us? Does it matter what it is? Is there any harm in that? Where can it go really well? Where can it go wrong? And a common way for people to connect into these, super ego, beyond the personality experiences and connections to consciousnesses and information sources outside of our what would normally be a 3D world. A common use for that is people turn to plant medicines, and in South America, ayahuasca is very popular. Some of the states in the U.S. have legalized psilocybin, and of course in Europe, some countries have legalized it. And in Africa, ibogaine it's iboga in Africa, and I believe that's also something that is legal in Canada. And there are other things. Frog medicine is legal in Canada. Kambo, Bufo, those are things that are legal in North America. And these are ways that people are connecting in to what they would deem a spiritual experience through plant medicines. Of course, cannabis, now legalized in Canada, but all of these medicines that I'm listing have been used for. And also, I do want to give respect to tobacco. Traditional First Nations or traditional South American, like 5,000-year-old tobacco, not what we would know as tobacco. And same with cannabis, being something that has been around for thousands of years. It's not new, but our use of it is different now. And this is where I think the topic of today is, what is our relationship with these plant medicines? Where do they fit into our lives as a mental and physical aid? And then where does it go into something that's more of a spiritual aid? And what are our experiences with plant medicines in that way? And what is our relationship? How do we build that relationship for each of that mind, body, spirit level? Those relationships are built in different ways. And so thereby is the theme of today. Is that good? I can talk a lot, so
it's a lot to dive into. This is exciting. This is exciting. This is good. Well, let's just go one thing at a time. I know you're such a library. You're an encyclopedia when it comes to this kind of information, especially more on like the personal, emotional, and spiritual level. I love that you're an expressive arts coach, because that's definitely something that I've found that has opened up from the psychedelic experience, just as much as it allows us to move into our trauma and to heal areas that really bring up a lot of fear and keep us from experiencing. It also opens up our creative potential and our creative energy, and allows us to express ourselves so that we can really get to learn more about ourselves through expression, through working with creative energy, which is what I feel psychedelics and any practice of like deep self-awareness and therapy does. Is it's like, okay, well now I've opened up this space, what do I do with it? And we're so used to coming back into our mind to think about that next thing to do, when we can start to work more with our creative energy and experience ourselves fresh and new every moment, really, and see like, oh, okay, I don't always have to premeditate every decision I make in life.
Yeah, I do love how the studies on LSD, MDMA, psilocybin for trauma-based psychotherapy as an aid, especially MDMA. I love MAPS and the annual conference in September held in Toronto, because they actually show like studies that are being run at Ryerson, U of T, Johns Hopkins, for how these psychedelics are being used to affect different brain parts to actually reduce. So MDMA reduces, I believe it's, and I'm quoting an actual study, but I'm not the scientist here. But look it up for yourselves. But if I am accurate and correct, the MDMA reduces the active amygdala, which is our fear center. So when we are recounting a stressful or painful traumatic experience, when our fear center is reduced, we become more open and less fearless to speaking about that experience, talking about the pain. And that opens us up to express what that experience was for us. And something as simple as, like, it doesn't necessarily have to be, rainbows and unicorns and flying through the universe kind of psychedelic experience. Sometimes psychedelics can be very just targeted at the right amounts or the right ways towards simply reducing fear, or helping a person to be more talkative about something that they didn't have, they were too scared to use their words for, or in some cases, maybe help somebody be more visual minded about something that they only had words for. And it helps them to connect into something that's a bit more of a visceral, physical feeling, or sounding something out. It becomes more of an acceptable way of communicating than just simply using words. Each type of medicine can open up multiple ways of expressing a past experience, and that new way of expressing or reducing the fear of expressing can help to readdress a pain that's sitting inside of us, readdress it as in revisit it, but also readdress as in speak of it or share it in a different way that we're suddenly much more open to because of the plant medicine.
I love it. I love it. Well, yeah, because our known reality, most of it comes from our perception, and if we maintain the same perception of a past experience, who's to say our consciousness was fully aware, at that moment in time, which is great because it allows us to go back to prior experiences that we may have had one idea about, and then we go back into it, and then all of a sudden we have all this different perception, which to me like goes into like the deeper learning about awareness, and to know that this eternal awareness is always here and records all experience, not just related to our perception of the experience. So we always have access. That goes into Akashic records and all that. But
yeah, I love that point that we take in all of the information of a scenario. We take in all the smells, the colors, the movement, the sounds. We take in everything. So when we go and recount that experience, we might only try and describe the words of what it, our perception was. But plant medicines can actually open us up to reconnect to the smells, the movement, the sensations, the colors. Like it brings on more of the memory, or again, it reduces the fear in our brain to go looking at more of the data, because a primary reason to shut out all of that information is it's an information overload on our nervous system, and it's too much for us to process all at once. So it's easiest for us to use strictly words, which is more of a cognitive experience. But when we start moving into nonverbal reflection, that becomes more of a subconscious or an abstract thought or a right brain way of processing something. So when we start moving into like psychedelics, can activate more of the right brain, or some psychedelics technically reduce left brain, leaving the right brain more open. And so we can actually go more into the nonverbal, non-logical, more abstract, more expressive experience, and maybe see that there's something there that we were too scared to take on more information of. And when you take something like psilocybin, or something, any kind of plant medicine that increases serotonin and dopamine, those dopamine's your reward chemistry, reward chemical. Every time you get a like, it's a dopamine ping. They call it a ping. And then there's serotonin, which is something that you produce when you're happy, when you're laughing. So laughter is something that serotonin will create more laughter. So when you take when a person works with a plant medicine that increases dopamine and serotonin, there is the likelihood that there is more levity. There's more lightness to something that was very heavy. Like it's very hard to look at something and laugh at it, but when you have a lot of serotonin in you, it just kind of becomes a little bit easier to laugh at it. And laughter really does solve a lot of problems. And who wants to laugh at something that's a horrible thing that happened to us? I don't want to laugh at something. But it's not about that. It's about saying we have a baseline, okay? So if I have a baseline where, as I'm sitting here right now, if you were to give me a bit of serotonin or a bit of something that makes me laugh, I might start to laugh. But if I'm recounting a traumatic experience or something that's just simply painful, okay? And let's be clear, trauma simply means a pain that I have stored and have not been able to express. That's just what that word trauma means. So really, it's been trapped inside of me. It's a pain that I didn't express yet. That's trauma. But at the point where we unbox that trauma, it then becomes pain. Like for the moment that we are recounting that, we are revisiting the pain. So now my baseline for where I might have started laughing if I had more serotonin, but once I go into pain, I'm now going below my happiness baseline. So we might need a bit more serotonin, we might need a bit more dopamine, we might need a little bit more oxytocin, which we get through touch and affection, that's oxytocin. We might need a bit more of that to come surfacing up from the sadness or the heaviness or the depression or the pain of recounting that trauma. And so this is about understand, and the word pops in my head, the relationship. So, you know, if I know that a microdose of, I'm going to go with cacao, because cacao is a plant medicine. It is Mesoamerican. It is over 5,000 years old, and it is tested, studied for over 50 years. It increases serotonin, dopamine, phenethylamine, anandamide. It's got all kinds of love chemicals, happiness chemicals, openness chemicals. So cacao really is a traditional plant medicine. So let's work with traditional ceremonial grade cacao, which is very strong. If I go chugging away at a liter of cacao, ceremonial grade cacao, just because I'm starting to feel a little bit low, that's way too much of a spike for dealing with what I'm trying to deal with. And this is where relationship comes in. If I know what my relationship is with cacao, if I know, so let's define that. If I know that ceremonial cacao at a quarter liter lifts my mood and makes me feel a little bit awake, and then at a half a liter makes me want to get up and move and dance and you know, express myself more. And if at a liter, I go frizzy brain and electrified, you know, nervous system, like that's my personal relationship with cacao. And we can't scientifically say that everyone will have that same reaction to a plant medicine, any kind, even food. So, which by the way, of course, food, all plants are plant medicine. So we first have to know, where's our baseline, or where are we basically on average day to day? What is the effect that any plant medicine has on us at different quantities? And then how do we relate what the effect of the plant medicine is on our mental, physical, emotional, and spiritual state? So if I know that I'm getting into a place where I am surfacing, and I'm going to speak for myself because I'm not a registered psychotherapist and I'm not a registered psychiatrist, so I can't speak too much about, you know, other people. But I can say for myself that if I start to feel, as an example, that I'm having a sluggish day, some people may turn to coffee, which, by the way, traditionally was and is still a plant medicine if you're in South America. Traditional coffee. Somebody might turn to green tea. Definitely, there are monks that do green tea ceremonies. There are temples for green tea. It is a plant medicine. And cacao. I might turn to cacao to lift my spirits that day, to maybe give me a bit of energy, maybe to help me with processing a memory that's surfacing for myself. But I have to know what is my amount of cacao that will help me to just get to a point where I am being supported, not solved. Okay, so point number one about a plant relationship with a plant spirit is, how does it affect me at different states that I'm in? And knowing our intimate relationship. What cacao does for me does not do the same thing to almost anybody else. That's one. And then two is my relationship that I've turned my plant medicine into a crutch. Do I need that cacao? How much do I actually need? If I do need some support, what amount do I actually need to feel that I'm supported enough to move forward in my own power? So that's a second level of looking at a relationship. And the third one is, and it starts to get into something a bit more spiritual, what reverence do I have for this plant medicine? How do I speak of cacao? Do I speak of cacao as a medical drug? Do I say I prescribed myself, 250 mils of Peruvian cacao in order to offset the stress and anxiety response? Am I doing it medically? Or am I saying, I could use some support. I need to call a friend. I can call a human friend. Lots of studies, by the way, on calling a furry friend, your cat, your dog, right? and the stress response that helps with. And what about a plant friend? Do I see it as actually something that is supporting me the way that my cat and my dog does, or my family member does, or my friend does? We don't speak, we don't say, I'm going to prescribe 20 minutes with my dog, and then 4 minutes with my cat, and 30 seconds with my friend. Like, we don't kind of talk about them that way. And I think we can start to talk about, some people could start to talk about, because now that cannabis has moved into, like, it's medical marijuana. And so that's another point to talk about, is like, when is something become more like, how do we say, prescriptive or by the numbers versus intuitive, personal, and an interactive relationship with a plant spirit. So I've said a lot. This is usually me with a marker board, so people can trace me. So I'm going to pause there.
Okay, beautiful. Well, let's start from a position then where somebody is coming in and looking for advice. Let's say there's somebody watching right now who has never used psychedelic medicine, but is interested. They're like, okay, well, I'm starting to be aware that a lot of the propaganda I heard in the past was just that, it was propaganda, and that there actually is healing properties to these medicines. I also have seen some people like really kind of go way left field or right field or whatever you want to say with this as well. So I'm a little apprehensive. So what's your advice to someone who is just deciding, who hasn't even fully decided yet? So I think this is a very good beginning point, and then we'll work from there.
Okay, so I am in a professional field, and I work with being able to only make suggestions of things that are legal. So I can't speak too much about, let's say, a psilocybin, because I can't speak to somebody introducing themselves to magic mushrooms, because I can't prescribe that or condone that. But what I can say is that we can generalize plant medicines, whether it's cacao or somebody decided that they did want to go into experimenting with psilocybin. The direction that we take is in my opinion, always the same. So let's speak about somebody who's at a point where they've not ever seen anything like tea or coffee or cacao or any kind of psychedelics, legal or illegal. Let's say that somebody's at a point where they've never actually seen any of these as like a person, as something that they can actually have a conversation with. And so if I say it in that way, the first, where I start people at is, where do you feel like you are lacking in your self-healing journey that you need support? So first thing is to take stock on, what have I tried? What have I done my best with? Where do I feel like I'm uneasy, uncomfortable, unhappy within myself, where I could use some support? Like, I feel like I haven't, attained the happiness or the freedom that I need. So I need to start saying, okay, where do I start by looking outward? Okay, first and foremost is, what is my personal need? And what am I willing to start asking for support with? The reason why we have to start there is because this is a very personal journey. And when people start going out on the internet and start researching, especially something like ayahuasca, and they get like 1,000 horror stories because like people don't have a good relationship with it. And I'm talking from a perspective of people that are flying down to South America where it is legal and doing these retreats. So I can speak to that. The thing is that they look to all these other people's experiences to see, well, which one should I do? And it almost starts to become like shopping for an experience. So step one is, to keep this simple, is if people are looking to go shopping for simply an experience, ooh, I heard that there's lots of colors on, mushrooms, I want to try some so I can go to a party and get colors, then that's your form of relationship that you're going to make with any kind of plant medicine. People will do that with cacao. They'll drink a a liter of cacao and go dancing because it gears them up a certain way. That's their relationship with it. But be honest. So step one, be honest with yourself and what is it that you're really looking to form for that experience as your relationship. And then be clear that that is what it is. Because I've heard hundreds of times that somebody's like, like a quote. Here's a quote. Oh, I'm a child of the 60s. I've eaten so many magic mushrooms at every kind of party and every kind of concert and every kind of like friend gathering. I know this stuff inside and out. And if I say, "What? Have you ever attended a ceremony?" No. What's no ceremony? I'm like, have you ever actually considered that the set and the setting and how you present yourself to that same plant medicine that you've had years and years of experience with will completely, utterly change your entire experience with that same plant medicine. So, and anybody that I've ever asked that question to and just having conversations with, they like almost everybody that has not been to a ceremonial context, they say that they have no reason to believe that it will act any different than all the parties and all the times that they had all their like, melting walls and projections. And so the first thing I say is take stock on what it was that you were looking for. Did you get it? Did you want a party? Did you get it? Yes. Did you ever think that it could be a spiritual support team? Did you ever think that it could be something that is a deep, heavy emotional support team? And as soon as a person within themselves connects with what is really their reason for doing any action, taking any plant medicine at all, their brain chemistry changes. Their subconscious mind, their shadow work, everything kicks into a different gear once they start looking at the same plant medicine. So this is why we have to always start with being very honest with how exactly are we labeling what our goal is, what's the outcome that we're looking for, what's the relationship that we're about to enter into, because how we present ourselves is going to psychologically and medically change our neurochemistry, our physiology when we enter into that relationship with any plant medicine. So that's step one.
This is such a great point, Peter. So let me help out then with the example here. So I'm wanting to use these things because I've been experiencing anger. This is something that I've definitely worked through with psychedelics and other practices. And say I've looked into it a little bit more, and I can definitely tell there is resentment towards a few people, and I just can't seem to shake it off. I'm still holding on to this resentment. I'm still holding on to some hate, and I'm also harboring some self-pity. And so I'm really looking to heal this. So let's take that example.
So in an example like that, the first thing I do is say, can you share a story? Like, don't do this now, but the first thing I would do is say, can you tell me more, or can you express more about self-pity, resentment, anger? Like, tell me different ways that you experience it. That like go beyond the words, but like, where do you feel it in your body? What sound does it make you? What kind of anger is it? Is it or is it like hitting? And then even the self-pity, is it something in the pit of your gut? Is it something does it make your shoulder sense? Like we go through a set of how does our body store that tension? And then from there, we look at how does our body want to express that tension? So we start there, dry, sober, you, clear, authentic as you are. Then we look at where is there a restriction? Where are you having trouble getting into a place of exploring that, or accepting that, or expressing that, or forgiving that, like shifting your perspective. Then we look at where is there limitations to your own innate ability with guidance to shift those things. There will be a point where people will either just full on do the work and like totally like just psychotherapeutic modality get through it. And there are some people that feel like that's too slow for them. There are some people that feel that's just way too scary for them. There are some people that feel like they're just totally mentally blind. I do not have imagination around this. I cannot envision myself getting over this. And that's where people tend to start looking for what kind of plant medicine would reduce my physical strain and stress. Some people might go to a CBD oil or some kind of cannabis if that helps to reduce them. But they might also go with chamomile tea or St. John's wort, right? So, and then what about like fear of expressing? What are some things that help to reduce fear? And again, that would be a journey to looking at the different possibilities of all kinds of plant medicines to help reducing fear. And this is where I think people start. The reason why we start with what is our own ability to personally express that. The reason why this is the most important point that I can say. People jump past their own innate ability straight to some form of chemical. Okay? And anything you eat is a chemical. Okay, so anything you ingest is going to be some form of chemical. So let's just call it chemical as a generic term. If we bypass our own self journey first, then we don't actually know what effect the chemical is having on us. This is why we have to start with, where am I able to get past my own fear and my own boundaries? And then where am I blocked in a way that I'm incapable of seeing a different perspective? That's where people tend to start to turn towards some form of plant medicine, some form of psychedelic that helps them to break through a limiting belief or break through a vision or an imagination or a physical tension barrier so that they can get quickly past that barrier with the help of a plant medicine support, but go back into their personal expression, the personal journey, the personal like exploring of that. So that's like step one.
Beautiful, thank you. And I think that is such a great point, because when we're talking about building a relationship with psychedelic medicine, it hand in hand correlates to building a relationship with ourselves, you know?
Yes.
Because we don't want to use it just like any other thing that ends up being a dependence or a crutch, because in reality, something like psilocybin or something stronger like ayahuasca or peyote, sometimes one experience even could be really all you need, because maybe it was only that one area of a block. You open that up, and these teachers and what the intelligence of these plants teach you how to work with your own intelligence. And so long as you start to maybe just that one neural network or that one connection that just needed to be made, and then all of a sudden you're good to go.
Yes,
so I think this is a really great point that you're making.
Support that, and to support that, just to say that you're not just making a statement. Medically, the tests show, specifically with MDMA, that in as little as one 4-hour session, people with severe trauma from, I think it's war, being in wars, like vets, war vets, like one session, maybe sometimes even like 2 to 3 sessions tops, but usually very often one session, they have their breakthrough. It reduces their fear. They go through the recounting of what it is. They express what they need to express, and that's it. Like they have reduced their traumatic response. Their triggers have shifted. They've reprogrammed their behavioral response to the same triggers. They're just full on like better. And the statistically, it was like over 85% of the people find success in like one session. And when they look for relapse, some of these people are going like 3 years after like one session with no relapse. Like they just don't need a second session. That's how powerful this can be. But I want to be very, very clear that those studies, the ones that I'm referring to, I happen to know it's Dr. Ann Wagner. It's specifically not just a person taking MDMA and walking off to a party. It's literally, it's CBT. It's some form of CCBT. It's a cognitive behavioral therapy session with a pretty sure it's psychiatrist. Has to be psychiatrist because there's MDMA involved, with a psychiatrist, And it's in a gray, I literally saw a photo. It's like a gray room with like one photo and like a plant. They don't want to try and stimulate your senses. They don't want to distract you from the point. You're there to talk about you, to not go staring at like posters on the wall and whatever laser light shows. This is about you're doing the work, you've hit a wall, it's affecting you. You go to a plant medicine to aid you in your personal work. Thereby, we see that we did it. We're the ones who achieved that with support of the plant medicine, but we still achieve that, which means when the plant medicine wears off, we are left with the experience, the memory, and the self-empowerment to deal with it. We don't then rely on it.
Woo! So good, so beautiful. And this goes right into the intentions. And unless you come into a point with what you're saying and really acknowledging why you even want to go to this in the first place, which is a good reason to see why are you using, if you're say currently using pharmaceuticals in your life, why are you using like cannabis in your life, like to really tune into to this why gets us closer to the intention. What are we looking to get out of this experience? What do we want to know? And that is so important to know, because this opens up a lot, and being able to continue to direct that point of what you want to know continually. Because if you're in a party session, you've already forgot about your intention, unless it was just to have fun. But like if your actual intention was something like deeper, it's so easy to get distracted. We get distracted without being on a medicine or without being on a substance anyways. So it's so important to know that intention, because then when other things start to come up, which will happen because that's part of your experience, you know why you're doing this. You know why you're here. And if you're having like a sitter or somebody, which is kind of what I want to come into you next, I'm not going to ask for any recommendations, but I'm going to say, what if someone has kind of decided, I want to take psilocybin mushrooms. I'm seeing that that's going to help with, say in this case, my depression. I've been battling depression for a long time. And I'm thinking, okay, I don't know of a practitioner to go to. I know I can't go see a psychiatrist for that. I know a friend who has some mushrooms available. So let's say this person can access these mushrooms. What would you recommend? So now we know we're getting to that point of like intention. What else can you recommend? And even if you want to dive into intention more, maybe not recommend, but just from your own experience, what would be helpful if a person's coming in with this kind of line of thinking?
So I happen to know a fair bit about, okay, so I do want to say something in support of a lot of people that may be listening to this. We are not speaking very much right now about physical conditions. So fibromyalgia, things about like pain, things where cannabis is often prescribed in order to reduce physical pain or anxiety caused by nervous system, stimulus. So there are people that their relationship with the plant medicine is that of dependency. And this is a fantastic option for people to have plant medicines that can be there to support them in a safe way that can be monitored by medical professionals. So I do love that that is an option for people. I personally had to actually use CBD oil for my dog. And I actually did bring my dog to a vet for this. And we did put the dog on prescription medicine, and it just did not work well for my dog. And when we gave him CBD oil, it solved his problems, and it solved all the problems that the pharmaceutical drug caused. So it was a fantastic thing for his arthritic pain is fantastic for my dog. I can't speak to everybody, but I do know that is a common use. So for anybody that does have it, so that's why I'm saying, let's remember, we're not putting down or we're celebrate, like, what your relationship is your relationship. It is fine. That's okay. If you need to microdose on something every single day as your form of antidepressant, I'm not judging you. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. What I'm saying is, be clear of your relationship, know where you end and the medication, whatever kind of medication is or whatever kind of plant medicine is, starts, and know who's who. Don't lose yourself in it. Just always understand that, you know, it's a team effort there between that cannabis for the person with the fibromyalgia or my dog and his arthritis pain. We knew where he ended and where the medication started. And the reason why I say it like this is because it helps us to monitor our responsibility. We take responsibility for what our choice is in taking this, and we don't take, how do I say this? We don't take it for granted. This is very important. Okay. So now moving into, let's say, a case where people, I have heard stories of, I do not prescribe this, so I can't say anything about my own perspective. I'm just saying, I'm going to speak to stories that people have shared about their personal experience. There are people that microdose psilocybin as an antidepressant because it increases serotonin levels. And there are some people who have come to terms with and have been diagnosed with underactive serotonin production. It's just a natural way that they are. And to my knowledge, I don't think there's a way to fix underactive serotonin production other than psychospiritual methodology, visualization methods, and you know, like neuroplasticity and time. But in a short term, some people might need to address depression. And some ways that people do that are with something that numbs pain. So like alcohol, pretty common one for depression, disconnection. Cannabis can numb pain of depression or anxiety or whatever. So I'm not saying it can, I'm saying people do use it for that because I can't speak to its medical efficacy. And some people use psilocybin to get through depression or sadness by helping them to increase their serotonin response so that it brings some levity to what they're going through, which basically means brings them back to baseline, okay? Because we're not ever trying to turn something heavy into a party. We want to acknowledge heaviness. We want to acknowledge that depression is there. We want to acknowledge where we end and where the medication starts, okay? I'm saying like plant medicine. So if you're in a position where you have decided for yourself that you're struggling way too much with something like depression, and if you've decided that your friend has, I'm just using your example that you gave me, has mushrooms, and you've heard stories about it, so you feel that it's something that you wish to try, the first thing I would say is, because I can't say I agree or disagree, I can't say I suggest it or I don't. But what I can suggest is personal safety. If anybody's going to try anything, and let's be honest, people are. So from a place of harm reduction and harm prevention, I would say this. Know that whatever it is that you are trying is going to be specific to you that day. Not forever, not next week, and will not match what your friend tells you. There are 100 different kinds of mushrooms, and just because it works great for them does not mean it will work great for you. So try everything in small amounts and increase if you're going to try something, okay? And again, I'm talking generically about everything, legal or illegal. I'm not trying to specify that you should be doing something illegal, but it's the same thing you have to try. If you're going to try, I've served thousands of jars of cacao bottles, okay? It does not work the same for everybody. Some people get hyper, some people get happy, some people use it as an antidepressant, and it actually scientifically is one. Some people use it to go to sleep because the magnesium relaxes their legs. Some people only need I don't know how it's possible, but they use 1 tablespoon of it. And I've seen people drink a half a liter. How can you possibly tell somebody what to expect? So you have to go with, who am I? How do I feel right now before I take this substance? Start small. How am I now with the substance together? Who am I after the substance? So I'm directly answering your question. Who am I at the moment that day with this particular variety? Okay, I could talk about cannabis. I actually got prescribed cannabis because vertigo. I can't even count the number of strains. I do not do well with cannabis. It just does not do well in my brain. It just made more dizziness. But I tried all kinds of blends, all kinds of strains. They're all through medical marijuana delivery system through a doctor. And I tried small amounts, large amounts, different days, with food, not with food. So this I can speak to, and this is generically what I would say for everybody anyway. Even cacao on an empty stomach, not the same as cacao on a full stomach. What are you mixing it with? Oh my God, the number of stories I've heard of people with psilocybin and beer. Why would you put psilocybin and beer together? I don't know. Some people, maybe they can do that. I can't imagine doing that. So just know where you are at that moment and register that is just that moment. Whatever you ate, whoever you talked to that day, whatever negativity you have in your mind, how much war you watched on the news. I mean, everything's going to shift it, whether it's a full moon or not a full moon. Like, I mean, there's so many things at play. Register everything. So that's my advice. Register everything, watch your pattern, get to know yourself. If anything, that's what's a great thing is going to happen from building relationships with anyone and anything that you ingest is you're going to learn who you are on different days and how these things change you and who you turn back to. If anything, any plant medicine is going to bring you to a place of really knowing who you are if you're mindful with it.
Love this. I love this. And this is just such a beautiful check-in. So on that note, I'll speak a little bit about my experience with psilocybin. I've definitely dealt with like depression and anxiety, and this has definitely helped with both. And that is, I do kind of like my own ceremony beforehand. I do a yoga practice to really tune into my body. In that, I'm already tuning into my mental state. I'm tuning into some of the things that were still going on throughout the day. I'm tuning into some more of my emotions. I'm going to do some breath work to really open myself up and to be in a place where I have the energy to potentially deal with some like heavy stuff that's coming up, so that I have the reserves, that I have the strength. And it's beautiful because already in this inquiry is part of, if not a big part of what, from my experience, psychedelic mushrooms do for me. They enhance my consciousness. They allow me to become more aware of my internal experience, which is, to me, why this is such a powerful thing about building a relationship. I have to build a relationship with myself to even know where I'm at with, like you're saying, Peter, to understand where I end and this medicine begins. Now, it's a cohesive relationship, but also, how do we appreciate anything if we're not aware of ourselves and are aware of that thing? Because I know for me, during some of the beginning stages of using psychedelic medicine, had some really amazing experiences, but then there was other experiences where I was like, oh, I'm kind of doing more of it than I actually am. I'm not giving enough credit to the medicines. I'm like, oh, like I'm good and I'm fine. And then I kind of develop a bit of an ego, think I'm farther along than I actually am. And then not realizing this medicine was helping me. Just how like when a friend's around, say a friend stays with you for a week, you start to feel really good when before you weren't feeling as good. They leave, you have a few days where you're kind of feeling a little bit off. You're like, oh my God, it actually was because Jerry was over. And Jerry's hilarious, and Jerry's making jokes about things. Jerry's making me feel like my problems aren't as big as what I'm making them, but he's also not negating them either. He's allowing me to be with them, but he's also like, kind of helping me to see the big picture. So I really love what you're saying. Like this is really like very significant details that even some of these areas that I haven't always considered when it comes to like all medicine. When you're talking about like plant medicine, talking about my relationship to any, especially whole food, because there's such intelligence in like a plant just as it is, because all of them have an effect. And I know I had major digestive issues. My kind of quote unquote awakening, which to me just more became aware of consciousness and myself as consciousness and my own conscience, had a lot of digestive issues. And I realized I was at a point where, which I think so many of us, especially in the Western world, is I was just taking things in more for sensual pleasure and on a basis of like what gave me energy. But the actual quality of what I was taking and what I was eating or what I was ingesting and what that was actually bringing me, I wasn't overly aware of that, which kind of scared me in ways. And I'll be going into further episodes why it's important to even have some days where you fast and some days where you just kind of have a mono diet, so you can start to be aware individually how food affects your body. Like, how does it feel when I just have 2 bananas and I don't eat anything else? How does it feel
Yeah.
when I just have cauliflower and I don't eat anything else? And it was like, took me years to just have the discipline to be able to start doing that. It's still a process I'm in. I definitely do not know the physiological effect of the majority of things I put in my body. Well,
It's
I don't
interesting.
want to say majority, but
Yeah,
a lot. Yeah.
you're pretty aware, but like, we get to this level of self-awareness through that self-inquiry, through that self-check-in, through that self monitoring, right? So it's interesting, like, I've worked with cacao for 5 years now at a ceremonial level. So I've run ceremonies, I've helped people through psychotherapeutic processes using cacao. And I went through, like, it was incredible to see how much variety there was between Guatemalan, Mexican, Colombian, Peruvian, cacao. Then there's mountain cacao, like, African cacao, like there's plains cacao and mountain cacao and like volcanic cacao, and like it's so different, and it's
And they all
incredible.
have different effects.
Yeah, all complete. Like, you can blindfold me and give me, like, I'll know exactly which one I just drank, and not by flavor, by like, this is me on Peruvian cacao, and I have to like go just run it off or shake it off or like move, because But then
By
you
the
get like,
way, I just want to mention, I actually used to sell a sacred bean cacao drink that Peter made, and he made it very ceremonially, and like I was so into it. It was like just incredibly good stuff and made. But like Peter knows what he's talking about when it comes to this kind of stuff, as you can tell. But I just thought that was a fun background story.
so that's Ecuador. So Ecuadorian is where that one ended, was Ecuadorian. And so, but like, how incredible the difference between like Guatemalan cacao, very heart centered, very kind of mellow. The Ecuadorians, this kind of blend where you can kind of like feel excited, but also be meditative. Like, you can have a lift, but you can also stay kind of focused. And it's like, and that's cacao. And people do this with cannabis. People do this with their strains of mushrooms. People do this with like tobaccos. Oh, I've been working with tobacco for ceremonial use. I don't speak very much of it because ceremonial tobacco is a First Nations tradition. It's also a South American tradition, but First Nations down there as well. And there are different tobaccos. So South American tobaccos, Nicotina rustica, called mapacho. North American is Nicotina americana, and we just call it tobacco. So they operate differently. But like, even with tobaccos, you can walk into a tobacconist and there's 100 different tobaccos from all around the world, and they're all going to do something a little bit different, and they're going to do it differently for each person. So if you were to walk in, like, I can't walk into, there's not very many cacao shops where they have like all the different kinds of cacao all blended up into the same drink, so you can put them side by side and test them. But people can do that with cannabis, where they'll like, I had to do that when I was doing it for my vertigo, and I had to stack them all up. I had to write little charts on what amount did this one do and this blend do, and what did it all mean to me. And I would find that people would be making these suggestions to me on which one would solve my problem, and it would like drastically make it worse. Like, it just didn't work for me. So that personal, like watching what it does to me, and what am I left with afterwards? That's a really important point. But this is something I want to get to, because I don't know how much time we have, but I want to get into the deeper level of it. When I was working with cacao, I ran ceremonies with Shuni. Yaron came from Guatemala, and I actually served cacao with her at her Mayan fire ceremonies and cacao ceremonies that she was doing in Toronto. She would be like, no, we have to use this Mexican. It's okay that we use the Ecuadorian, and like, they all work a little different. And I just want to kind of step into something a bit, like, when we start paying attention to the effects that these things have on us, okay, these medicines, these helpers, these beautiful plant spirits, we start to notice. The reason why I was mentioning the different countries is because, when you take the exact same cacao bean, because they've done this, and grow it in Africa where it costs less money and they can produce more for like producing chocolate, drinking the exact same strain from two different countries does not work the same way in you. If you take tobacco, I have actually had tobacco gifted from South America, grown in Ontario. I watched it grow, and I've had them back like side by side, and they do not, they're the same seeds from the same plant. They do not operate the same way. And so not only is there a sense of who are we, but this is where it starts to turn into like, who's the plant? So if I take literally the same jar of cacao and I drink it on a mountainside, and I take the same jar and even the same day, and I go to the water and I drink it by the water, I do not have the same experience. There are so many neurochemical and neurophysical exchanges that are happening by the water that are happening differently at the mountainside. So already the location is going to change my same one jar of cacao. Now, if I take that same bean, grow it one on a mountainside, and grow another one by the water, if that's possible. I think it is possible. Yeah, it is. Costa Rica. And grow some by the water. If it was the exact same bean, one on a mountainside in Ecuador, same bean, oceanside, Costa Rica, drink them side by side in the same place, in your home, you're going to notice a difference. You will, because the minerals and everything, the water, the air in that location, all the sun, the amount of sun that it gets, the amount of rain that it gets, it totally changes the way that bean grows. So now, if I start reading into that, I'm going to start to notice these slight little changes in my body that gets me to be because I can't really say too much about the bean being a different bean. So how am I going to know what the difference is unless I become very, very self-aware at what that bean is doing to me, the mountain bean versus the ocean bean, same bean, but different regions. Now I have to pay very close attention to how I'm reacting to what is essentially different locations, same bean, different locations, different elements are coming into play. So now I start to become aware that I tend to really like mountain more than I like ocean. So it starts, the plant medicine starts to move into a place of, it's still scientific, it's still medical, it's still something that can be seen at a molecular level. But what does that mean about me that I like mountains? That's not something, I didn't grow up near mountains. I don't have a cultural or a psychological attachment to mountains. I just happen to know that when I do anything to do with mountains, I just feel better. And if my beans come from coffee beans coming from a mountain instead of from some plain in Ethiopia, I just do better with it. So now that's really starting to show me something about myself, that it's beyond what is the usual scientific medical response to the chemical, because it's the same chemical, it's the same bean, but a different location that it came from. So now we start to connect into that. And something else that changes, because I happen to know that I really like mountains. I love everything, don't get me wrong, of course, but there's something in mountains that just activates me in a different way. And I know that from my plant medicines that I work with, like tobacco, like cacao, and even green tea, which they're very particular about green tea. Oh my God, how much dew fell that morning at 6 a.m., handpicked by a female that's 23 years old on this side of the Chinese mountain. Like we talk about, like, I'm not that accurate. These people are accurate, okay? And it matters, they can tell. So they can tell how many like cherry blossoms were falling that day. It changed their tea. This is a big deal. That's really subtle energy, but you have to be able to see yourself and how you react in order to know what these chemicals are doing to you. Well, here's something that really happens when you're really subtle with yourself, okay? You start to hear voices in your head, your voices from your body, not being metaphorical, voices from your body, voices from your blood, voices from your breath, voices from stories that start to surface in your mind when you're dealing with something from a mountain, different than the stories that surface when you're dealing with something from water. They just surface. They start to express themselves out of you because they're a reaction to the minerals that you're taking in. Just like the beans grew differently by the water as for the mountain. So something starts to surface, memories, connections, ideas, relationships start to form to these ideas, internal relationships. And when we connect into our voice, and we are doing this with a plant medicine, that we are tracing where the plant medicines are coming from and what their effect is on us, we can start to separate out, where do I end? Where does the plant medicine start? When is a voice that appears in my head only happening when I'm on that plant medicine? When is the voice from the plant medicine and not mine? Your buddy Jerry comes, you start laughing. Jerry leaves, Jerry's voice is gone. You don't get the same jokes in your head. That's Jerry's jokes. We know he's gone. We can start to kind of create some similar and kind of get the vibe or the style, right? In his voice, kind of, we say, you know, we write the writer's voice, but it's still, we know it's not his. You get what I'm saying? We know it came from our head after he left versus from Jerry's head. Now we're deepening the relationship. Now we're getting to a much more subtle, as they would say in yoga, right? The subtle energy, which is only really, we become aware of it when we're acknowledged that it's possible, that we can hear these influences, these suggestions, these voices, these shifts, these vibes, these resonance. I resonate with that. People would say all these different words that people use, right? When we start paying attention to who we are and who the medicine is, and we keep that separation, but again, we're doing it together. We're always walking together. We start to hear things that are not ours. And we start to get ideas that were not entirely ours. I mean, obviously, we have a chemical inside of us, so we get new brain parts, or, you know, there's synapses that are, LSD connects synapses like crazy, right? Like it's incredible what LSD can do to a brain. So we are thinking differently on LSD than when we're not on it, says the science. Okay. So ideas that we're getting when LSD Jerry's cracking jokes in my head, and then those synapses break, and I can't make those connections the same way unless Jerry's around. I have to be careful that, number one, very important, I do not look poorly upon myself. Okay. I am not lesser than because Jerry ain't around. I'm not good enough because I'm not as funny as Jerry. We always have to keep to the positive. I'm so grateful for the memory I have when Jerry was around. Okay? That Jerry's not, how many people are going to call their LSD Jerry now? Oh man, I spent the weekend with Jerry. Anyway.
Love it. Jerry came over again.
Jerry came over. The ideas Jerry has, I wish I had those ideas. So the thing is, that we have to look for, how do we make use of the ideas that we got from that green tea, from that cacao, from that cannabis, from that whatever, okay? From the psychedelic, if people are in places where they can do that. You start looking into the history of it, anybody that's in South America that is traditionally using ayahuasca, okay, so let's make reference now. They all say the same thing. They all say the same thing. They say, oh yeah, the voice we hear is always a feminine voice. I don't care if I'm a dude. I don't care how female I am or not. I don't care if you're a dog. We all see it. We all hear it. It comes in female. I've never had a person ever share a story with me in 15 years that they saw ayahuasca as a giant peacock. Okay? Like, or, that ayahuasca is exclusively a male whale. Like there is only so many stories that people, tens of thousands of people get about something like ayahuasca. I can only refer to that, right? I can refer to cacao as well, but there's discrepancies there in history. But with ayahuasca, it's always a female. People generally see a boa, a snake, if it's from the jungle, Shipibo style, or they see condor, birds when it's from the mountain, like that's the Karo shaman. They're not shaman, Karo day keepers, and the maestros. And you get llamas. Maybe you get something that's very earthy or vine-like. So the vine gives you the sensation of the snake, but it's always feminine. And these are the kinds of things that really caught my ear over the years. And I do have shamanic training, as in I have been trained by South American, what we call shamans. They don't call themselves that because they don't use that word. And I have, and I can only say it was only 4 days, but an actual Siberian shaman from Balkai Mountains, Lake Balkai and Altai Mountains, which is literally the source of shamanism. So I have spent 4 days training in that. And I just want to refer to saying what is so incredible to me is, like, look into history about all of the pictures or reference to, let's say, cannabis. There's only so many pictures and variations of how cannabis is portrayed. Why do people have such a similar experience with it? We all are going to have, I know for a fact that cacao is going to make one person fall asleep, one person wake up, one person get jittery, one person puke, one person see rainbows like they just had mushrooms. They're completely different. But when they refer to the voice of the cacao, they refer to it similarly. This is something that's very, very interesting to me. It's something I spent most of my time when it comes, I didn't spend too much time in the science of it because, I mean, there's lots of people doing that, but moving into the way that we perceive and the relationship that gets formed around these plant medicines has been very interesting to me. So I'm only pointing that out because we're talking about knowing where we are, knowing where we end, what kind of support that we're looking for. And when people are looking to create relationship with these plant medicines, if they look into the lore, if they look into what is the generic physical response, we can't know that we're going to have the same physical response. But what's really interesting, so we have to always still take it slow, know yourself, know that the stories do not apply to you. You have to get to know yourself. And even the science doesn't always apply to you either. There's always a range. But when you start looking into the shamanic end of it, it starts to become the opposite. It's actually quite unifying. There's a lot of very similar experiences from a huge variety of people, age ranges, countries, but they refer to it the same experience. And it's like, how is that possible that they hear the same type of voice? Like, cacao is generally referred to as a very loving spirit. I've never heard somebody say that they heard a raging, angry spirit when they drank cacao. There are other medicines that might bring that on. I don't, and so this is something I want to also extend the conversation into is, let's go into, as we're learning who we are, as we're learning what our relationship is, and we're starting to get into really subtle levels of like what exactly this version of the plant medicine is doing versus that version, keeping that relationship an eye to eye or a me and you togetherness. We start to get these ideas, we start to get experiences where we have ideas come into our heads. And this is what I want to say about this. We need feedback from other people, even though other people can't truly know who we are, and we definitely can't explain what we saw, with Jerry. But it does help us when we share an experience with somebody and they can reflect what they've heard back to us, so we can hear what we're saying, we can feel what we're expressing to somebody. When they reflect that back to us, it helps us to gain some clarity over what was a projection, what was a hallucination, what was an actual experience that we may have just misinterpreted, and these kinds of things. So this kind of realm. So I do want to say, as kind of a final point to a person's relationship journey, is remember at the end that what you're experiencing while with the plant medicine will be a different experience when you reflect it to somebody when you are off the plant medicine. So it's a very good thing to develop a relationship with people that you can share these plant medicine experiences with, so they might be able to bring some grounded, maybe more objective perspectives over something that we may have subjectively just expressed because we could when we're on a ton of serotonin at that moment. So that's a point as well.
Beautiful, beautiful. And I feel like psychedelics also give us more of that objective view of our subjective self as well, which is really interesting because, you know, sometimes we don't open ourselves, a lot of the time, especially if it's more vulnerable stuff, we don't open ourselves up to actually even be able to see that reflection because we don't necessarily want to know the truth of how we're coming off to others, which, you know, relates to our own insecurities. We don't always want that, which is beautiful that psychedelics can provide, but it's so important to build that relationship, know the right dosage. Otherwise, you could just get your subjective experience right in your face, then all of a sudden get all your judgments about that experience, and then you can just start to get caught up in that and be like, oh, you know, this is like very overwhelming, which is another good reason to do it in ceremony. Or if you're not doing it in like a group ceremony, say with a shaman, at least have a sitter and start with very small doses to be able to use safely. Now it is past 9 o'clock, so we are going to have to get moving on, but to close up, but I just want to send things over to you just for a last moment. I did want to talk a little more about integration, but it doesn't seem like we're going to have time, which it's all good because I kind of expected there to be more. Well, I think that was
kind of a point. That was a point to be made because I was like, well, as a final point, sharing, that's really about integration. So that is the point to integration, is knowing that what your experiences were when you were relating with the plant medicine is not necessarily the whole perspective. And for integration perspective, you need to share your ideas with a few people that can bounce back subjective to your objective, objective to your subjective, so that you can get a more well-rounded perspective and help to integrate by sharing these experiences. Just know that sometimes it really comes down to your before and after, and did you achieve the state that you were looking for? Did you integrate? Did it happen through the process of working with the plant medicine enough that you don't need to share with somebody, or should you share with somebody and help them and have them help you have a broader perspective of what happened? And that is what integration really is. So that was the point. Yeah.
That's beautiful. And an example might be like through using psychedelic medicine, maybe you became aware of an addiction of yours and maybe realized the severity of it, and then maybe even realized it was hiding these particular insecurities, or you seeing that there's shame and that you're hiding that, oh, you know, I don't know if I'm like capable of making as much money as I told my wife that's capable of. So maybe there's an insecurity there with like being able to provide for the family or something along those lines. That even just that fear reduction for a moment to become aware of this insecurity, or become aware that you have a need, like I need to open up because I need some more attention in this area. I need some love, but I have a lot of shame around this area, so I'm afraid to do that. That even that is part of the integration, like you're saying. But however, you want to make sure that even before you even do the experience, know you're going to probably have some experiences like this that reduce fear, allowed you to go into areas that normally there would be more fear. So it's to know yourself in that way that, okay, this is not going to be potentially still not easy for me to talk about, but now think about who are some people in your life that you trust, that you could go anywhere, that you could go into grief or your deep sadness or anger, that you know is also too not going to just try to spew advice in your ear all the time too, who's like a good listener. Consider some of those people, have them as backup, because you will start to confront some of those things again, and there may be a little less of that fear reduction. So you might not want to go all the way in, which on psychedelic medicine really allowed you to feel the emotions that were hidden beneath that fear. So this is, to me, what part of that integration, like you're saying, you really want to have those supports set up, and also for a day or two after. And the stronger you get up with psychedelic medicine, your energy field is actually more open, and you're going to actually have less energy. So this means that you're going to want less stimulus coming in, because you already have so much to process. The last thing you need is like more information. So that's why I'm saying you want a friend that's a good listener as well, because you might not necessarily need advice. You have expanded awareness. You have a lot more to work with. You have more space between some of the things that might have been right in your face that you were just like, I don't know what this is, And so that is a final point that I'd like to make about integration. Something you'd like to share? To?
And I do love that you brought up that some people are going into plant medicines because they think it's going to be all happy and it's going to solve a problem. But remember that it's part of a growth journey. And sometimes the plant medicine really wants to show you that you probably thought everything was just too happy and too easygoing, and it shows you that there's hard work to work on. It brings up things for you to to the surface, for you to go and process after the journey. So the journey can be something that is a resolution journey with psychedelics, but it can also be the start of a new deep journey as you grow. So just remember that whatever happens with the plant medicine, when you approach it with the proper relationship, with the proper respect, and with the proper intention setting, whatever happens generally is exactly what's supposed to happen as part of a journey for you to go and work with somebody outside of that session to help continue that journey forward.
Yeah. And the synchronicities are uncanny. It's absolutely amazing how much your intention will lead the entire journey, and you will receive the answers. But just because that wisdom comes, and you might even feel like the wholeness and completeness of being, say, beyond this thing, or maybe not even beyond, but you've overcome or you've reached the goal, know that is most likely a temporary experience. And like Peter is saying, there still is work to do, and this work isn't only meant to be, oh, well, then I better take another psychedelic journey. Not necessarily. You have the awareness of what it is now to work with, and you also have the reduction of fear to see that you can go to these places. So start to ask for support, get to know yourself a little bit more, because we can only take on so much at once, and the last thing you want to do is continue to use these psychedelic medicines too often, because it's going to bring up more things. And if you haven't dealt with the first thing that it brought you information for, you're not appreciating that experience, because it showed you something really, really great. It showed you something about yourself that was really that was deep, And so now it's time to really honor that. And if you've actually took the time and done a lot of work, and you've really reached a block that you've really gone with day in and day out for a while, and you're still having a challenge, well, then maybe that's going to be your opportunity to be like, let's take another smaller dose, or maybe I want to up it and just take a little bit of a stronger dose. Because for me, I took psychedelic medicine twice when I was a teenager. Both times, one time I went to a hospital, and another time because I told my mom, and then she wanted me to go to the hospital. But and then another time it was just a bad trip, and it was taking me into basically a new reality. I felt like I was going to a black hole, and I wasn't really ready to surrender, because it was going to show me what I'm seeing now is a new way of being, a new way of living, a new way of seeing life. And I was afraid for my current way of seeing to be deconstructed. And that's kind of what happens. But when I went back to psilocybin, when I got very sick at 23, and I was using it to really explore this illness, I started with very small doses at first, and work my way up, starting with 0.1, 0.2, and working my way up. So we'll talk about more of that next time, but I think it's very important, because these things are master teachers, and we want to have respect, because if we don't, it's not going to be the kind of experience that you're looking for. You will receive negative feedback.
And remember that if you do have a bad experience, it doesn't mean it was because it was the wrong medicine. It doesn't mean that, you have to look at was it because you took too much? Was it because the setting was wrong? Was it because the person that you were with didn't know how to help you through something that came up? So just remember that if you do ever have a terrible experience with any form of plant medicine, go and integrate, go and have a conversation with somebody who's skilled and experienced, has years of experience as a medicine carrier and a medicine worker, because they might actually show you that there was something there that just you need to go back in again to help. Even because now, what did you do? Just take on another trauma? You have to. It's another thing to have to now carry around. So when you have a terrible experience, just remember that come back to it again, but with support and guidance, so that you can see that there was maybe a more educated and more supported way to have done it that would have avoided that. Don't blame the medicine every time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Well, we'll put your Facebook page in the link here for the stream on the Facebook Live. We'll also end up putting it on YouTube as well. So if people want to get a hold of you, if they need any information. Also, if you want to talk to me about anything, I'd be more than willing to help. Also, I want to mention we are doing a draw for MAPS is doing a webinar series right now with some of the top psychonauts from around the world, people who've explored using this medicine for like 30, 40, 50 years, some of them, and some of them having just amazing scientific backgrounds, psychology backgrounds, or just simply pure consciousness explorers. So private message me actually if you're interested in this. Very, very simple rules, just like liking our page and subscribing to our YouTube page. And I'd love to give you this. It's a $300 value, and we have 2 tickets to give away. Tune in next week where we have 2 guests. So it's going to be a special one. You're going to find out in a couple of days. We might go a little deeper into psychedelic medicine, or we might turn over into fasting and the mucusless diet, fruitarianism, and that kind of stuff. So just stay tuned on the Wave Facebook page to find out more information. Thank you, Peter. Thank you so much, dude. You really drilled into some subtle details, which to me really outlined the importance of getting to know yourself, know where you're at, know where you stand in regards to anything that you're using more frequently in your life as medicine, but especially if you're looking to use something stronger like psychedelic medicine, but as well as like cannabis and those kind of things. Like if you don't know where you start and begin, maybe it's good to, if you do it every day, just take a day off, it'll still be there, but take a day off and really get to know yourself. Then you can appreciate the medicine more, because anything that you appreciate, you listen to a little bit more because you have more respect. So think about anyone you have respect for in your life and the relationship you have with them. So the more appreciation you can have for the medicine you're already using, you can begin to ask more questions. There's intelligence here. It will help you. It will serve you. Just because you had an experience yesterday doesn't mean it'll be the same today, and doesn't mean it'll be the same tomorrow.
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
working with where your consciousness is at, which is what Peter's saying. So again, thank you so much. We'd love to have you on again, Peter, because you just dive so microscopically into like some of like these really important details. So thank you for really bringing that in. And yeah, it's been such a pleasure.
Thank you so much. It was wonderful to see you and to spend time with you. And yeah, we'll do it again.
Beautiful. Much love, everybody. Have an incredible rest of your night. And again, tune in next Thursday at 8 p.m. for episode 3